This is CBN NewsWatch.
It is Thursday, May 27, 2001. I'm Ephraim Graham. Thank you so much for joining us. Ahead today, President Joe Biden now ordering intelligence officials to pick up the pace on the investigation into the origins of COVID-19, including the possibility it came from a lab in China. The deadly threat to Israel, Hamas and other terrorist groups fired thousands of rockets into the Jewish state, but one analyst warns Israel faces a far greater danger. Police departments across the country shrinking as many leave the force because of anti-police sentiment. So how can communities be protected? We'll explore the question. And the super blood moon glowed into the skies Wednesday. We're going to bring you a look and tell you why many Christians think of it as biblical significance. All those stories and more are ahead in today's edition of CBN NewsWatch. I want to begin this half hour with President Joe Biden ordering U.S. intelligence officials to redouble their efforts to investigate the origins of COVID-19, including any possibility that might lead to a Chinese lab, after the administration suggested privately for weeks that the idea was far-fetched. Although President Trump and some of his aides had discussed it, but more evidence has come to light recently potentially supporting the lab theory. And in hearings Wednesday, the leaders of the National Institutes of Health remain united in their testimonies that they strongly believe COVID-19 originated naturally. But Dr. Francis Collins, head of the NIH, did concede he wants every possibility explored.
We cannot exclude the possibility of some kind of a lab accident.
The Senate unanimously did pass an amendment by Republican Senator Rand Paul that would block U.S. funding of Chinese gain-of-function research for improving the severity or transmissibility of a virus. The COVID pandemic led to increased unemployment benefits. Now many employers are struggling to find workers. Many businesses and Republicans are blaming those extended federal jobless benefits. It's why Republican governors across the country say they'll cut them off next month. Senior national correspondent Heather Sells has more on what's happening in the job market and what it means for the economy.
Across the country, as businesses emerge from the pandemic, they're facing a labor shortage. It's affecting everything from Main Street retail to the corporate world.
This market I've not seen anything like this market.
Executive recruiter Kristen Giles says employers struggle these days to find top talent.
I have employers that I work with that are wanting to see, 3, 4, 5, 6 candidates before they make a decision. And unfortunately, there aren't 3, 4, 5, 6 quality candidates.
The same story is playing out across other sectors like retail.
We are going to be short of workers for a while, and people are doing every creative thing they can to get people back.
That makes this a workers' market, and they want more.
From financial to benefits. We're getting requests for our healthcare program is at an all-time high.
And businesses are digging deep. New hires at Amazon get a $1,000 signing bonus. McDonald's, Target, and Costco have also agreed to signing bonuses or higher wages. Chipotle will offer free college tuition. So many are asking, why is it so tough to hire when 16 million Americans remain on unemployment? A major concern is that the weekly $300 in federal unemployment give people a reason to stay home. And research shows nearly half of those unemployed receive more income from jobless benefits.
Unemployment paid me more than I would make in a crazy week.
It's why 22 Republican governors are ending those benefits starting next month.
Those benefits really, instead of providing a safety net, provided more of a hammock for people.
Unemployment numbers are beginning to drop thanks to increased vaccinations, more schools reopening, and the hope that people will continue returning to good health. And here's a promising sign. Consumers are spending at a healthy rate. Many economists predict the economy will expand by 7% in 2021, the fastest annual growth in more than 30 years. Heather Sells, CBN News.
And here's a quick look at some of the other stories we're following for you right now in the CBN newsroom. An employee who gunned down 8 people at a California rail yard Wednesday and then killed himself as law enforcement rushed in had talked about killing people at work more than a decade ago. That's according to his ex-wife, who said she never believed him until he did it. A southwestern Ohio woman won the state's first $1 million vax-a-million vaccination incentive prize Wednesday. More than 2.7 million people signed up in the lottery set up by Republican Governor Mike DeWine to boost lagging vaccination rates. And one Ohio town has passed an ordinance banning abortions and imposing a fine of $1,000 on anyone who breaks the law. The Cincinnati Enquirer reports the Lebanon City Council is making the community a sanctuary city for the unborn. Turning now to the Middle East, for 11 days, Hamas, helped by Iran, along with other terrorist groups, tried to paralyze central and southern Israel by firing thousands of rockets from Gaza. Now, strategists are looking for other potential threats, and Chris Mitchell reports from Jerusalem. One Israeli expert points to the north, a much bigger threat, he says, from the north.
I have to admit that as an Israeli, this is not the only front that I'm concerned of. I look north and I see Lebanon and I see Hezbollah.
Counter-terrorism expert Boaz Ganor tells CBN News Hezbollah and its estimated 150 to 200,000 missiles represents a far greater threat than Hamas.
If you ask me what concerns me with Hezbollah, everything that concerned me with Hamas, but big time, much more than what we had.
After studying the recent war, Ganot believes Hezbollah would try to overwhelm Israel's #1 defense, the Iron Dome. Ganot also points out Hezbollah possesses not just rockets, but missiles.
What's the difference between a missile and a rocket? A missile is a guided rocket. You can guide it, you can direct it to the targets. So they have guided missiles with much, much bigger warheads, and they cover all the territory of Israel. They can launch rockets from Lebanon and hit Eilat, which is the most southern part of Israel.
CBN News has reported on Hezbollah's facilities inside Beirut that convert its rockets into guided missiles. It's all part of a multi-billion-dollar Iranian project.
Iran have built this enormous capability for one purpose, and in my view, one purpose only: to deter Israel from attacking the nuclear facilities that they build in Iran.
Ganor, like most Israelis, takes Iran at its word regarding the desire to eradicate Israel.
They are saying that loud and clear. Once they can meet their ideological goals with practical capabilities like a nuclear bomb, that's an existential threat to Israel. Should bear in mind how small Israel cannot observe one nuclear bomb and recover out of it.
Ganor says Hezbollah represents an unprecedented challenge to Israel and that any war against it would dwarf the recent conflict with Hamas.
I believe that Hezbollah would cause much more damage and much more casualties in the numbers of hundreds, if not thousands. In that case, no doubt in my mind that the Israeli government and the Israeli military and the Israeli public would expect the Israeli government to do whatever they can in order to prevent those atrocities against Israel in a much lesser restrictive manner than Israel done in Gaza.
While the U.S. seeks to re-enter the Iranian nuclear deal, the chief of the UN nuclear watchdog says Iran is now enriching uranium at levels only reached by countries seeking atomic weapons. As that clock speeds up, it could be just a matter of time until Israel sees this northern border threat come to fruition. Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Coming up, the Biden administration pushing for a two-state solution in the Middle East, one for Israel and a new state for the Palestinians. But one observer warns negotiators working in the region need to understand the reality of what they're dealing with in the Middle East. We're going to explain when we come back. Stay with us.
Life is better with a good night's sleep. Get your free DVD or booklet of Protect Your Sleep today.
I'm Ephraim Graham, and this is Studio 5. Cruise with me as I discover the good things happening in the world of music, sports, television, and movies.
the fact that Ryan Coogler was going to be directing the film, I knew that something special was going to happen.
We'll chat with artists at the forefront of entertainment and explore the connection between popular culture and faith.
I asked my pastor, I said, well, does that mean I'm supposed to be a preacher? He says, well, no, you already have a pulpit.
Wednesday night at 8:30 on the CBN News Channel.
Remember for a moment what it was like to be a child. You believed every story you were told. You saw a world full of endless possibilities. What stories will the world's orphaned and at-risk children believe? We believe the Bible tells the only story truly worth believing. We believe that every child should have the opportunity to dream, the chance to take challenges and turn them into possibilities, the chance to stand on the promises of God, to recognize their place in the greatest story ever told. They have their whole lives ahead of them. Theirs is a world of endless possibilities. They are looking for a story to believe. We will tell them that story. Will you join us?
Welcome back. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is wrapping up his trip to the Middle East today after meeting with the Egyptian President El-Sisi and Jordan's King Abdullah Wednesday. Blinken is pushing for a resumption of peace talks and a two-state solution between Israel and the Palestinians. Appearing on this week's episode of The Global Lane, the founder of the Joshua Project suggests the dispute may be resolved only after negotiators understand what they're facing.
I think it's critical, first and foremost, to recognize what this conflict is about, because without knowing what it's about, you can't solve it. What we're seeing here in this recent conflict between Israel and Hamas is a conflict between the forces of normalization and fellowship and friendship on one side, between Jews, Muslims, and Christians in the Middle East, and the forces that are opposing those things, the dark forces that are opposing those things on the other. So Hamas is not fighting, as it so often positions itself, for Palestinian freedom or for Palestinian rights. What it's doing is trying to dismantle any potential infrastructure, social and emotional or otherwise, for coexistence. So all of the positive developments that you were seeing in the Middle East, whether they were very high profile, like the Abraham Accords, or things that were sort of just below the surface, like, for example, the first time in Israeli history that an Islamist party was going to sit in the coalition with either Likud or Naftali Bennett's party. These are all forces, and not to mention forces right on the ground in Israel. These are forces for fellowship, for friendship, for peace. And Hamas saw this as an opportunity to stoke rage and anger and hatred amongst the forces that oppose those things. And its most obvious targets in this respect are Jews, because Hamas's platform is fundamentally anti-Semitic and eliminationist and genocidal. But fundamentally, it's targeting Palestinians, Jews, Muslims, Christians, all throughout the region, as much as it's targeting Jews in particular.
And the Palestinian people don't really realize this. According to the Gatestone Institute, a recent public opinion poll showed 57% of Palestinians oppose a two-state solution, and that's a Palestinian state side by side next to a Jewish one. The same percentage of Palestinians say they support armed struggle. So in other words, they want one state without Jews, Israel destroyed. So how can you negotiate peace with a majority of Palestinians when a majority of Palestinians have that attitude?
I think the answer ultimately is going to come first and foremost from Israel, and by Israel I mean the growing coalition of Jews, Muslims, and Arabs that make up Israel, making clear that Israel has nowhere to go. One of the, I think, sort of vicious tricks that advocates for Hamas and its allies in the region often invoke is the idea that, well, Israel is an apartheid regime or Israel is a colonialist regime like the French in Algeria. The key difference, aside from all the moral, theological, and ethical reasons for opposing that grotesque comparison, the pure difference between those things on just a tactical level is that, guess what? Jews have nowhere else to go, and Israelis have nowhere else to go. So the first thing that Israel needs to make clear, as I think it sought to make clear during this latest round of conflict, was that we're not going anywhere. you can stoke this program and you can hope for ethnic cleansing of Jews from the river to the sea all you want, but we're not going anywhere. And I think ultimately that needs to lie at the bedrock of any conflict mediation between the two parties. Israel and Jews are not going anywhere.
So how has this recent conflict in Gaza affected the Abraham Accords? You mentioned those accords. How about the prospects of bringing more Arab countries into a friendly relationship with Israel? How's it affected that?
So, you know, I've talked about the Abraham Accords often on my podcast, Good Faith Effort, and one of the things that I've been pleased to hear from former guests and from friends of the pod is that there actually is a good deal of energy still powering these Abraham Accords forward. I think we're going to see more normalization. I think we're going to see people recognizing, you know, the normalization accords, the Abraham Accords ran on the energy of recognizing that Hamas's preferred way and Hezbollah and Iran's preferred way of dealing with the region is stoke as much conflict as possible, create as much chaos as possible so that they can seize power and dominance. And the Abraham Accords are built on the opposite premise, that the way to find mutual flourishing for all peoples in the region is to invest with each other, to create together, to build cultures that are mutually reinforcing, much like you find, for example, in the heyday of King Solomon. You find King Solomon building the first temple in partnership with the other great monarchies of the region, because ultimately we flourish best when we flourish together.
And you can learn more about what's going on in the world beyond the headlines by tuning into the Global Lane tonight. It begins at 8:30 Eastern on the CBN News Channel. Still ahead, a major problem across America, police officers leaving the force, and it's become hard to recruit new ones. So what can be done to protect our communities? We'll have that story coming up for you right after this.
On October 1st, 1961, history was made when a tiny station began transmitting the first signals of the Christian Broadcasting Network.
CBN, the Christian Broadcasting Network.
And now, a new era has begun with the all-new CBN News Channel.
Just moments ago, the Iron Dome intercepted an incoming rocket right on the Gaza border.
Administering in this area, spiritual warfare is definitely involved.
A 24/7 news network, bringing you the news you want from a source you can trust.
In Kenya, 40% of the medical services are actually provided by these Christian hospitals.
Let's talk about the economy.
Believers here are joining together to win people to Jesus Christ.
All your favorite shows now in one place. Go to CBNNewsChannel.com to find out how to get the CBN News Channel on your TV all day, every day. CBN News. Life is better with a good night's sleep. Get your free DVD or booklet of Protect Your Sleep today.
Life. It's meant to be lived fully. Jesus said it. I came to give you life. Life to the fullest. Life in your family. Life in your finances. Life in your body, mind, and spirit. Life in your everyday. At CBN.com, we're taking what Jesus said seriously. We're here to help you discover life. Life. Live it fully. CBN.com.
Demoralized and demonized, police officers are quitting the force in droves, not just in big cities, but all across America. And it's not only a problem keeping officers, it's also a problem recruiting them. So what can be done to ensure communities are being protected? George Thomas is on this story.
It's happening from coast to coast.
Police departments across the country now experiencing an exodus of officers from the force.
From Washington, D.C., where a record 313 police officers have retired or quit since last June.
I think we're really hurtling towards a catastrophic situation here.
To Seattle, where the police chief there faces a staffing crisis after 180 officers walked off the job last year, and another 66 handed in their badges this year. And it's not just happening in big cities.
Tonight, more than half the force of a small-town police department has walked off the job in protest.
A year after the push to defund police departments and calls for policing reform, officers are demoralized and demonized. Recently, this police body cam video going viral, showing a woman berating a LA County Sheriff's deputy for pulling her over for using her phone while driving.
Do you have that picture?
You scared me and made me think you were going to murder me.
Okay, well, I'm sorry you feel that way.
Well, that's not just a feeling, you're a murderer.
The woman calling the officer a murderer numerous times before insulting him for his race.
Gas.
It's on the citation, ma'am.
Here you go, Mexican racist. You're always going to be a Mexican. You'll never be white. You know that, right? You'll never be white, which is what you really want to be.
There you go, dear.
White.
Have a good day.
Policing right now is just not a profession that is viewed upon favorably by a large segment of the public.
Captain Jones, thank you for an hour.
Paul Newdigate, head of the Virginia Beach Police Department, among those facing a depleted force. The city approved funding for 813 sworn police officers, but filling them has been difficult. How many vacant positions do you currently have right now?
112 operational vacancies.
Is that a problem?
It's a huge problem, because what it forces us to do is become very reactive, because now we're running from call to call, you know, from service demand to service demand.
Newdigate spent 30 years with the Cincinnati Police Department before moving to Virginia Beach last October. In the 7 months since, 50 officers have either retired or quit the force.
The national narrative, the anti-police sentiment is, you know, there are a lot of folks that were going to extend their careers, and it's not worth it to them.
And these are folks, I'm sure, with decades of experience.
Yes. So you are losing some of our most seasoned, you know, experience, decision-making. They're out the door.
New data shows the cities most targeted by demonstrators now witnessing a historic exodus in the past year. 233 cops gone in Louisville, Kentucky, where the shooting of Breonna Taylor sparked months of protests. In Portland, Oregon, 115 officers. And in New York, 15% of the force, a staggering 5,300 officers, have quit.
Virginia Beach Police, open up!
CBN News was recently invited to the Virginia Beach Police Department's 70th Annual Academy. Recruits on this day learning various tactical exercises. A year after anti-police protests, Newdigate admits it's harder than ever to recruit and retain officers, particularly those of color.
We are not where we need to be in representing the diversity of our community.
82% of his police force is white. The national average is about 72%.
And what we're finding is, you know, there is a lot of pressure, especially for people of brown and black, that for them not to be part of the policing profession at this time.
He says even after recruits make it through the vigorous selection process and are hired, some end up quitting weeks later. This year's academy started in January with 38 recruits. 6 of them have so far dropped out. Chief Newdigate is hoping the rest of them can make it through July. As Newdigate met with his command staff on this morning, he stressed that building relationship continues to be key in bridging the gap between the badge and the community it serves.
We have to get back out into our communities. We have to have the face-to-face dialogue. They have to see the men and women in blue as more than just a uniform or a authority figure. They have to see you as a person that's really out there just trying to be that protector of the community that we all want.
It's been challenging to do that with the pandemic, but as more get vaccinated and restrictions loosen, Newdigate is eager to get his officers back, building a path forward to better trust with the citizens they serve. George Thomas, CBN News.
Coming up, the long-awaited super blood moon appeared Wednesday. We're going to show you what it looked like and tell you why some Christians believe these moons have biblical significance. We've got the story for you when we come back. Stay with us.
Life is better with a good night's sleep. Get your free DVD or booklet of Protect Your Sleep as the world watches from the outside.
It's a big diplomatic tug of war here in the Middle East.
Go inside the story with Jerusalem Dateline.
Israeli archaeologists are talking about a discovery that could change the thinking about the Temple Mount.
Join CBN Jerusalem Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell and get the biblical perspective on the events shaping the world.
What starts in Israel then ends up going to other places.
Watch Jerusalem Dateline Friday night at 8:30 on the CBN News Channel.
Life. It's meant to be lived fully. Jesus said it. I came to give you life. Life to the fullest. Life in your family. Life in your finances. Life in your body, mind, and spirit. Life in your everyday. At CBN.com, we're taking what Jesus said seriously. We're here to help you discover life. Life. Live it fully. CBN.com.
People around the world, including in the United States, watch the Super Blood Moon Wednesday. It's a combination of a total lunar eclipse and a brighter than usual supermoon. In a super blood moon, half of the moon vanishes in the Earth's shadow, while the Earth's sunsets and sunrises are projected onto the black surface of the eclipsed moon, giving it an orange or red color for many viewers. The color can appear different depending on the location people are seeing it from and by other things as well, like how much dust is in the atmosphere. Although there are scientific explanations for these types of blood moons, many Christians also see prophetic implications behind them because they're directly mentioned in Scripture. For example, Joel 2:31 says, "The sun shall be turned into darkness and the moon into blood before the great and terrible day of the Lord's coming." Other verses also refer to the moon turning into blood. Now, to find out more about the blood moon and the Bible throughout history, go to CBNnews.com. Time now for your Thursday Thankful, and today I hope you'll join me in this prayer of gratitude. God, I thank you for things you've delayed or denied in my life. You know what's best for me because you know your plans for me. I encourage you to again join me in that prayer for your life and make today a day that is filled with gratitude. That is going to do it for this edition of CBN News Watch. You can always find more of our programs on the CBN News Channel. You can find them there at any time, as well as online at cbnnews.com. We would love to know what you think about any of the stories you've seen here today. Please email us, newswatch@cbn.com. We love hearing from you. You can also reach out and touch us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Hope you'll join us again right back here, same time tomorrow. Be sure to make this a thankful Thursday. Goodbye, and God bless.